The courthouse restroom echoed with the harsh slap of a hand against metal, as Karen Matthews planted herself firmly in front of the accessible stall door. Her manicured fingers gripped the handle with white-knuckled determination, while 12-year-old Kayla Washington stood frozen in her wheelchair, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across her confused face. "You can't use this one," Karen declared, her voice cutting through the institutional silence like a blade. "This is for people who actually need it." Kayla's brown eyes widened behind her glasses, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on the wheels of her chair. The morning had started so differently. She'd been excited about the field trip to the Jefferson County Courthouse, eager to learn about the justice system alongside her 7th-grade classmates from Roosevelt Middle School. Mrs. Chen had promised they'd see where real decisions were made, where laws came to life. "I do need it," Kayla said quietly, her voice barely audible above the hum of the ventilation system. "I'm in a wheelchair." Karen's laugh was sharp and humorless. She adjusted her designer purse strap and smoothed down her blazer, the fabric expensive enough to reflect the overhead lights. "Anyone can sit in a wheelchair, sweetie. I know what real disability looks like. And this isn't it." The words hit Kayla like a physical blow. She'd been born with spina bifida, had spent her entire life navigating a world that wasn't built for her. Her legs didn't work the way other kids did, but she'd learned to adapt, to find strength in her differences. Her parents had taught her to be proud of who she was, to never let anyone make her feel less than whole. "Ma'am, I really do need to use the accessible stall." Kayla tried again, her voice growing stronger. "I can't transfer into the regular stalls." Karen's expression hardened. She was a woman accustomed to getting her way, someone who'd built her life around the assumption that her voice mattered more than others. At 45, she'd carved out a comfortable existence in Millbrook's upper-middle-class enclave, serving on the PTA and organizing charity galas that made her feel important while keeping the recipients of her charity at arm's length. "I'm calling security," Karen announced, pulling out her phone with theatrical flair. "This is trespassing. You're not supposed to be in here without supervision." "Mrs. Chen knows where I am," Kayla said, her voice beginning to shake. "She's right outside with the other students." But Karen was already dialing, her fingers stabbing at the numbers with aggressive precision. 911. "Yes. I need police at the Jefferson County Courthouse immediately. There's a suspicious individual in the women's restroom who's refusing to leave." The operator's voice crackled through the speaker, audible in the tiled space. "What's the nature of the emergency?" "Ma'am, a black child is trespassing in the accessible bathroom stall. And when I confronted her, she became belligerent. She's clearly not disabled and is taking advantage of facilities meant for people with real needs." Kayla's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd faced discrimination before, subtle looks and whispered comments, but nothing this brazen, this cruel. The courthouse restroom felt like it was shrinking around her, the walls closing in as Karen's voice echoed off the tiles. "I'm sending officers to your location," the operator said. "Please remain calm and wait for their arrival." Karen ended the call with a satisfied smile. "They'll be here soon. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to scam your way into facilities you don't deserve." The restroom door swung open, and Mrs. Chen's voice called out, "Kayla, are you okay in there? The tour is starting soon." "She's fine," Karen called back before Kayla could respond. "Just finishing up our little chat about appropriate bathroom usage." Mrs. Chen appeared around the corner, her dark eyes immediately taking in the scene. A veteran teacher of 23 years. She'd seen enough playground bullies to recognize one in adult form. "What's going on here?" "This child was attempting to use the accessible facilities under false pretenses," Karen said, her tone dripping with manufactured authority. "I've already called the police to handle the situation appropriately." Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from confusion to outrage in the space of a heartbeat. Kayla has spina bifida. She's been using accessible facilities her entire life because she needs them. Anyone can claim to have a disability. Karen replied dismissively, I've seen plenty of people fake conditions for attention or special treatment. This girl doesn't look disabled to me. What exactly do you think disabled people are supposed to look like? Mrs. Chen's voice carried the steel of someone who'd spent decades advocating for her students. Kayla, honey, are you all right? Kayla nodded, but tears were beginning to blur her vision. She won't let me use the bathroom, and she called the police on me. Mrs. Chen stepped between Karen and Kayla, her small frame somehow seeming to fill the entire space. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you're preventing a disabled child from accessing facilities she's legally entitled to use. That's discrimination. I'm Karen Matthews, she replied, as if her name should carry weight. My husband is a partner at Matthews, Brennan and Associates. I know my rights, and I know when someone is trying to take advantage of the system. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway, and two police officers appeared in the doorway. Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with graying temples, looked around the restroom with obvious confusion. We received a call about a trespassing incident, he said, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely sure why he was there. Karen immediately launched into her narrative. That child was using the accessible stall when she clearly doesn't need it. When I confronted her about it, she became argumentative and refused to leave. This is exactly the kind of fraud that makes life harder for people with real disabilities. Officer Rodriguez looked down at Kayla, taking in her wheelchair, her school uniform, her tear-stained face. His partner, Officer Williams, younger and clearly uncomfortable with the situation, shifted his weight from foot to foot. Ma'am, Officer Rodriguez said carefully, this child is clearly in a wheelchair. She has every right to use accessible facilities. Wheelchairs can be borrowed, rented, faked. Karen insisted. I've seen it happen. People will do anything for special treatment these days. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. I'm calling the school administration and Kayla's parents. This is absolutely unacceptable. I want her removed from the premises. Karen continued, pointing at Kayla. She's disrupting the peace and creating a public disturbance. Officer Williams finally spoke up, his voice tentative. Ma'am, we can't remove a child from a public building for using accessible facilities. That's not illegal. It's illegal when it's done under false pretenses, Karen shot back. I demand you do your job and protect the rights of truly disabled individuals. The restroom was becoming crowded, and the air thick with tension. Kayla sat in her wheelchair, feeling smaller and more vulnerable than she had in years. She'd always been proud of her independence, of her ability to navigate the world on her own terms. Now, surrounded by adults arguing about her right to exist in public spaces, she felt like a specimen under a microscope. I just need to use the bathroom, she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the heated discussion. Mrs. Chen immediately refocused on her student. Of course, sweetheart. Officers, can you please escort this woman out so Kayla can use the facilities in peace? I'm not going anywhere, Karen declared. This is a public building, and I have every right to be here. I'm the one who called for help because this situation is getting out of hand. The sound of rapid footsteps echoed from the hallway, and a new voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? A woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway, her professional attire and confident bearing immediately commanding attention. Her badge identified her as Patricia Hawkins, ADA Coordinator for the Jefferson County Court System. Ms. Hawkins, Officer Rodriguez said with obvious relief. We have a situation here involving accessible facility usage. Patricia's eyes swept the scene, taking in Karen's defensive posture, the officer's discomfort, Mrs. Chen's protective stance, and finally settling on Kayla. What exactly is the issue? Karen immediately launched into her explanation, but Patricia held up a hand to stop her. Let me hear from the child first. Kayla looked up at Patricia, finding something reassuring in her calm demeanor. I needed to use the bathroom, but she wouldn't let me use the accessible stall. She said I was faking being disabled and called the police on me. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened slightly. I see. And you are? Kayla Washington. I'm here with my school on a field trip. And what's your disability? Kayla. Spina bifida. Kayla replied, her voice growing stronger. I've had it since birth. Patricia nodded and turned to Karen. And you are? Karen Matthews. I was trying to protect the rights of truly disabled individuals by preventing this girl from misusing facilities she doesn't need. I see, Patricia said, her tone remaining professional. And what qualifies you to make medical determinations about disability status? Karen's confidence wavered slightly. I don't need medical training to see what's obvious. She's young. She's alert. She can communicate perfectly well. So you believe that young, alert, articulate people can't be disabled? That's not what I said. Karen backtracked. I just think there are people who genuinely need these accommodations. And then there are people who take advantage. Patricia's smile was cold. Mrs. Matthews. I've been working in disability advocacy for over 20 years. I've seen every form of discrimination imaginable. But what you've done here today is particularly egregious. I haven't done anything wrong, Karen protested. I was protecting resources for people who actually need them. You prevented a disabled child from accessing facilities she's legally entitled to use, Patricia said, her voice gaining strength. You made medical determinations you're not qualified to make. You called law enforcement on a 12-year-old girl for the crime of existing while disabled, in a way that doesn't match your preconceptions. The restroom fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ventilation system. Karen's face had gone pale, and she looked around the room as if seeing it clearly for the first time. I was just trying to do the right thing, she said weakly. The right thing would have been to mind your own business. Patricia replied, Kayla, would you like to use the facilities now? I'll make sure you're not disturbed. Kayla nodded, and Patricia stepped aside to give her access to the stall. Karen finally moved away from the door, her earlier bravado completely deflated. Officers, I think this situation is resolved, Patricia said. However, I will be filing a formal complaint about this incident. Mrs. Matthews, I'll need your contact information. A complaint. Karen's voice rose in panic. But I didn't do anything illegal. You violated the Americans with Disabilities Act by interfering with a disabled person's access to public accommodations. Patricia explained. That's a federal civil rights violation. Karen's hands shook as she fumbled for her business card. I'm sure we can work this out reasonably. I'm not some kind of monster. You called the police on a disabled child for using a bathroom, Patricia said flatly. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about what that makes you. Mrs. Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It's the principal, she said, answering quickly. Yes. Mr. Harrison. We have a situation here at the courthouse. As Mrs. Chen explained the situation to the principal, Patricia turned back to Karen. I'm going to recommend that you be banned from courthouse premises pending a full investigation. This building serves all members of the public, including disabled individuals who shouldn't have to defend their right to exist here. You can't ban me, Karen protested. I'm a taxpayer. I have rights. You do have rights, Patricia agreed. But you don't have the right to discriminate against disabled people. That's where your rights end and their civil rights begin. Kayla emerged from the stall, her dignity intact despite the ordeal. She wheeled over to the sink to wash her hands, her movements deliberate and calm. Are you okay, sweetheart? Mrs. Chen asked, her voice gentle with concern. I'm okay, Kayla said, though her voice still carried a slight tremor. But I want to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids. Patricia looked at Kayla with newfound respect. What do you have in mind? I want to speak at the next county commissioners meeting, Kayla said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I want to tell them what happened today and make sure they know that disabled people shouldn't have to prove ourselves to use public facilities. That's a wonderful idea, Patricia said. I'd be honored to help you prepare your statement. Karen had been listening to this exchange with growing horror. Wait, you're going to make this public? I made an honest mistake. You called 911 on a disabled child, Mrs. Chen said, her teacher's authority cutting through Karen's protests. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I think we should head back to the group, Patricia said, gently guiding Kayla toward the door. The rest of your classmates are probably wondering where you are. As they prepared to leave, Karen made one last desperate appeal. Please, can't we just forget this happened? I've learned my lesson. I'll never do anything like this again. Kayla paused at the door and turned back to face Karen. How many other kids have you done this to? How many disabled people have you made feel like they don't belong? Karen's silence was answer enough. That's why I have to speak up, Kayla continued. Because if I don't, you'll do it again. And the next kid might not have Mrs. Chen and Ms. Hawkins to stand up for them. 3 weeks later, the Jefferson County Commissioners' meeting room was packed beyond capacity. Local news crews had set up cameras along the walls, and the audience buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread through the disability community about the young girl who would be addressing the commissioners about her experience at the courthouse. Kayla sat in the front row, her prepared statement in her lap. Her parents flanked her on either side, their faces a mixture of pride and protectiveness. Mrs. Chen sat directly behind them, having taken a personal day to attend the meeting. Our next speaker is Kayla Washington, announced Commissioner Bradley, reading from his agenda. She'll be addressing the commission about accessibility and discrimination in public facilities. Kayla wheeled herself to the microphone, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. The room fell silent as she adjusted the microphone to her height. Good evening, commissioners, she began, her voice clear and strong. My name is Kayla Washington, and I'm 12 years old. 3 weeks ago, I was discriminated against in your courthouse bathroom. She told her story with remarkable poise, describing Karen's actions, the police response, and the intervention of Patricia Hawkins. As she spoke, murmurs of outrage rippled through the audience. I want you to know that I'm not angry. Kayla continued, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that in 2024, disabled people still have to prove that we deserve to exist in public spaces. I'm disappointed that a grown woman thought it was appropriate to call the police on a child for using a bathroom. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before her. But I'm also hopeful. I'm hopeful because people like Mrs. Chen and Ms. Hawkins stood up for me. I'm hopeful because all of you are here tonight, listening to my story. I want to ask you to do 3 things, Kayla said, her voice growing stronger with each word. First, I want you to provide better training for courthouse staff about disability rights. Second, I want you to create a clear process for reporting discrimination in county facilities. And third, I want you to remember that disabled people are just people. We're not inspiration. We're not burdens. We're not frauds. We're just people who want to live our lives with dignity." The audience erupted in applause, and several commissioners wiped away tears. Commissioner Bradley cleared his throat and leaned into his microphone. "Miss Washington, thank you for your courage in sharing your story with us. I want to assure you that this commission takes disability rights seriously, and we will be implementing all of your suggestions." He paused, consulting his notes. "I'm also pleased to announce that we've voted to establish the Kayla Washington Disability Rights Fund, which will provide grants to local organizations working to improve accessibility in our community." The applause was thunderous, and Kayla felt tears streaming down her face. She'd never expected her pain to be transformed into something that could help others. Furthermore, Commissioner Bradley continued, "We've reviewed the incident at the courthouse and determined that Mrs. Karen Matthews violated county anti-discrimination policies. She has been permanently banned from all county facilities." The crowd's reaction was immediate and vocal. Some cheered, others called out, "About time," and "Justice served." Kayla felt a mix of relief and sadness. She'd never wanted to hurt anyone, but she also knew that consequences were necessary. Patricia Hawkins stood up from the audience and approached the microphone. "Commissioners, I'd like to add something to tonight's discussion. Please, Ms. Hawkins," Commissioner Bradley said. "In my 20 years as an ADA coordinator, I've seen countless examples of discrimination. But what made this incident particularly disturbing was not just the initial act, but the perpetrator's complete inability to recognize what she had done wrong." Patricia's voice carried the weight of decades of experience. When someone calls 911 on a disabled child for using a bathroom, they're not making a mistake. They're making a statement about who they believe deserves dignity and who doesn't. "However," she continued, "what gives me hope is the response from this community. The teachers who stood up for their student, the commissioners who listened and acted, the citizens who filled this room tonight to support a young person's right to be heard. That's how change happens," Patricia said, "not through grand gestures or federal mandates, but through individual acts of courage and community support." After the formal meeting ended, Kayla was surrounded by well-wishers and advocates. A reporter from the local newspaper asked for an interview, and several disability rights organizations invited her to speak at their events. "How do you feel about becoming a spokesperson for disability rights?" the reporter asked. Kayla considered the question carefully. "I don't want to be a spokesperson. I just want to be a kid who happens to use a wheelchair. But if sharing my story helps other kids feel less alone, then I'm happy to do it." Mrs. Chen approached as the crowd began to thin. "Kayla, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not just for tonight, but for how you handled yourself that day at the courthouse." "I was scared," Kayla admitted. "I didn't know what to do." "Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave," Mrs. Chen said. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid." As the Washington family prepared to leave, Patricia approached with a proposal. "Kayla, I've been thinking about what you said tonight, and I have an idea." "What kind of idea?" Kayla asked, intrigued. "I'd like to create a youth advisory committee for the ADA coordinator's office, a group of young people with disabilities who can help us understand what accessibility looks like from their perspective." "That sounds amazing," Kayla said, her eyes lighting up. "But why me?" "Because you understand something that many adults have forgotten," Patricia explained. "You understand that disability rights aren't about special treatment. They're about equal access to dignity." 6 months later, Kayla wheeled through the halls of Roosevelt Middle School with a confidence that seemed to radiate from within. The Youth Disability Advisory Committee had been meeting monthly, and their recommendations had already led to several accessibility improvements in county facilities. The Kayla Washington Disability Rights Fund had awarded its first grants, helping to install accessible playground equipment at 3 local parks and providing assistive technology to students in the district. "Miss Washington," called Principal Harrison as she passed his office. "Do you have a moment?" Kayla rolled into his office, curious about what he might want to discuss. "I wanted to let you know that we've been selected to pilot a new anti-discrimination curriculum for middle schools," he said, his face beaming with pride. The State Department of Education was impressed by how our school handled the courthouse incident. "That's wonderful," Kayla said. "Will it cover disability discrimination?" "Among other things, yes," Principal Harrison confirmed. "They've actually asked if you'd be willing to help develop the disability awareness component." Kayla felt a familiar surge of excitement mixed with responsibility. "I'd love to help, but I want to make sure it's not just about inspiration. I want it to be about understanding." "That's exactly why they want you involved," Principal Harrison said. "You have a gift for helping people see beyond their assumptions." As Kayla left the principal's office, she thought about that day at the courthouse. The fear, the humiliation, the sense of helplessness she'd felt when Karen Matthews blocked her access to a simple bathroom stall. It seemed like a lifetime ago. She'd learned something important that day, something that went beyond disability rights, or civil rights, or any kind of rights at all. She'd learned that dignity wasn't something that could be granted or taken away by others. It was something that came from within, something that no one could touch unless she let them. Mrs. Chen appeared at her classroom door as Kayla approached. "How did your meeting with Mr. Harrison go, Whoa?" "Good," Kayla said, rolling into the classroom. "I'm going to help develop a curriculum about disability awareness." "I'm not surprised," Mrs. Chen said. "You've become quite the advocate. I just want kids to understand that we're all different. And that's okay," Kayla said. "I want them to know that being different doesn't make you less than anyone else. That's a lesson the world needs to learn." Mrs. Chen agreed. "And I can't think of a better teacher." As the school day began, Kayla took her place among her classmates. No longer the girl who'd been discriminated against at the courthouse, but simply Kayla Washington, 7th grader, advocate, and living proof that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the courage to speak up, when speaking up is the hardest thing to do. The morning announcements crackled over the intercom, and Principal Harrison's voice filled the classroom. "Good morning, Roosevelt Ravens. I'm pleased to announce that our school has been selected as a pilot site for a new anti-discrimination curriculum, developed with input from our own Kayla Washington." The class erupted in applause, and Kayla felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and pride. She'd never wanted to be famous, never wanted to be the poster child for disability rights. But she'd learned that sometimes the roles we never wanted are the ones we're meant to play. Furthermore, Principal Harrison continued, "I'm proud to announce that the Jefferson County Commission has voted to rename the Courthouse Plaza in honor of all citizens who have fought for equal access and dignity. It will now be known as the Dignity Plaza." Kayla smiled, remembering Patricia's words about individual acts of courage and community support. Change really did happen one person at a time, one story at a time, one act of courage at a time. As for Karen Matthews, she'd disappeared from public view after the commission meeting. Some said she'd moved to another state. Others claimed she'd entered therapy to address her prejudices. Kayla hoped, for everyone's sake, that she'd found a way to become a better person. The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, and Kayla opened her history textbook to the chapter on the civil rights movement. She read about brave individuals who'd stood up against discrimination, who'd faced down hatred and ignorance with dignity and determination. She thought about the bathroom at the courthouse, about the moment when Karen Matthews had blocked her access and called her a fraud. She thought about the fear and humiliation she'd felt, but also about the strength she'd discovered within herself. Most importantly, she thought about the future, about the kids who would grow up in a world where her story had been told, where her voice had been heard, where her dignity had been affirmed by an entire community. The courthouse bathroom had been just a bathroom, but it had also been a battleground, a place where fundamental questions about human worth and dignity had been asked and answered. And in the end, dignity had won. Kayla Washington, 12 years old, advocate, and reminder that courage can come in any form, continued reading about the heroes of the past while quietly becoming a hero for the future. The world was changing, one story at a time, one act of courage at a time, one person at a time. And sometimes, that's exactly how revolutions begin.